Imagine losing everything in a hurricane, and the federal help you were promised never shows up. That's what sparked this heated clash between Rosa DeLauro and Kristi Noem, a fight over FEMA, disaster relief, and whether the government is abandoning Americans when they need it most.
Thank you, Madam Ranking Member. The floor now belongs to the gentlelady from Connecticut, the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, who got here as quick as she could. Thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. My God, this is twice in one day here, so it's great to see you. We're hearing hopping here. Thank you so much, and I want to thank the ranking member Underwood for holding the hearing today, and welcome to you, Madam Secretary, and thank you for appearing before the subcommittee today. I just want to begin with a message to your workforce, if I might, and that's I'm grateful, very grateful for the work that they do, from search and rescue efforts of the Coast Guard to our first responders around the ground after natural disasters to those keeping us safe in the air and on the ground and at sea. I want to start with some big picture questions because I think we know very little of the details about where the $646 million cuts within FEMA's grant programs will come from. It is no secret that there are numerous reports of you, if we need to correct the record, stating that you want to, quote, eliminate FEMA within the Department of Homeland Security. I'm concerned about the direction that the administration is taking with regard to FEMA, canceling programs like BRIC, a program enacted into law by President Trump in his first term without any evidence of waste, fraud, and abuse, alongside the freezing of grants, and now 2026 budget requests targeting even more of FEMA's resources. And just right now, in terms of looking at the cancellations, the Science and Technology Directors, Centers of Excellence, and Office of University Programs, as I mentioned, the FEMA-administered grant programs frozen virtually all grant obligations pending a review as it determines whether it will try to choke off funding for unacceptable political reasons. Resources for states and communities to respond to disasters, secure firefighting equipment, protect against terrorism, secure our ports, and much more is being held up. And as I mentioned, the cancellation of the BRIC program, funding to support hazard mitigation, reduce the toll of future disasters, save lives. That money's not going out. Research has shown mitigation efforts like BRIC save a minimum of $6 for every dollar invested and save more than double when including mitigation of economic impacts. So federal disaster relief should be readily available across the United States, regardless of where you live. Natural disasters happen everywhere. They should not be concerned about the federal government turning their back on them when they need the help the most. We need to give constituents what they need when they're facing tragedy, that they will not be stranded due to political discord. My ask of you is, what is your plan with regard to FEMA? Are you planning to eliminate FEMA? Your testimony references that you want to, quote, eliminate dysfunction of the current agency. I'm unclear, I don't know if my colleagues are clear on what you mean by dysfunction. And I'm concerned that you're causing more dysfunction within the workforce that should be preparing itself for the pending hurricane season.
Well, thank you for your question and the discussion on this topic today. President Trump has been very clear since the beginning that he believes that FEMA and its response in many, many circumstances has failed the American people, and that FEMA as it exists today should be eliminated and empowering states to respond to disasters with federal government support.
With all due respect, where is the evidence of the failure of FEMA? I don't know about everybody else on this. My state, Connecticut, was hit very, very hard with Superstorm Sandy. Every community in some way or another has been hit by that. And the FEMA on the ground, people come in, work with the families, deal with getting the funding out. Where is the evidence of the failure of FEMA?
Congresswoman, we still have claims open from Hurricane Katrina. We have fire claims that are still unpaid to people who said they were due them 7 to 8 to 10 years old. They have never been paid by FEMA. So one of the worst things that the federal government can do is to stand up in front of the American public and say, we will be there, we will walk alongside you in the most horrible time of your life, and then never follow through on it.
Well, that's
what
not...
the president has said is he's sick and tired of federal agencies that pick and choose who wins and who loses. He wants to make sure that the federal government's commitment, when it makes a commitment, that it follows through. So he's going to empower states.
The federal government is abdicating its commitment to the American people who find themselves...
It did certainly under Joe Biden's administration. Now President Trump's going to make sure
let me just say this to you. The Office of Professional Responsibility. The Office of Professional, because I knew you were going to go there. As you know, FEMA's Office of Professional Responsibility, under the Biden administration, there was no evidence, no direction or agency or field leadership to discriminate against disaster victims based on political affiliation, which was a charge.
I'll follow up with you.
Well, and I will follow up. I will follow up, and I'll follow up with my colleagues, quite frankly, and to really listen to people whose states, communities have been devastated, and what role FEMA has played. I don't know how many millions and millions of dollars went out in Louisiana. Actually, I've asked my staff to calculate that when Katrina hit. And the response was overwhelming. And the response has been overwhelming. If you want to make corrections, that's fine. We all agree with that.
Yeah, we can point to thousands and thousands of
well, if you wouldn't mind getting this committee, the information and the evidence where you talk about the dysfunction of the agency and where it has really failed. That would be important to those of us who are appropriating dollars. And it would appear that the administration overall has a way in which they're looking at dismantling the federal government. The states will never have the amount of money because the federal government isn't going to pass that money to the states to be able to deal with what happens. It's when the federal government comes in and be able to give a hand to do that. And I think it's very clear from what you said that both yourself and the president really want to dismantle the federal government and the agencies that have provided service to the American people for decades. I thank the chair for your time and yield back.
Imagine this. Your home has just been destroyed by a hurricane. Your kids are scared, you've lost everything, and you're waiting for help. That's the moment FEMA is supposed to show up, the agency that promises to walk with you through the hardest days of your life, to get you shelter, money, and a path to rebuild. For most Americans, FEMA is the last safety net when disaster strikes. And that's what made this hearing so explosive. Rosa DeLauro, one of the most experienced members of Congress on funding issues, came in swinging. Not to play politics, but because she believes that the entire disaster response system could be put at risk. She wasn't just asking routine questions. She was calling out what she sees as a dangerous trend, freezing FEMA grants, cutting disaster mitigation programs like BRIC, and sending signals that FEMA itself might eventually be dismantled. BRIC, by the way, is one of the smartest programs FEMA ever created. It focuses on preventing disaster damage before it happens, building stronger levees, reinforcing buildings, reducing flood risks. Every dollar spent on mitigation saves at least $6 in recovery costs later, not to mention lives saved. Cutting that kind of program is like canceling your health insurance because you feel healthy today. It might save money in the short term, but the cost when something goes wrong is catastrophic. And DeLauro's not just speaking for her own state of Connecticut. She's making a national argument. Natural disasters don't care if you live in a blue state or a red state, if you voted for Biden or Trump. A tornado in Oklahoma, a wildfire in California, a flood in Florida, all of them require rapid, coordinated, and well-funded response. She's warning that without FEMA, disaster relief becomes patchwork, dependent on which state you live in and what resources that state has available. That means some people will get help quickly and others will be left behind. Kristi Noem, however, is channeling a frustration that a lot of Americans actually share. FEMA can be slow, bureaucratic, and sometimes deeply unfair. She points to the fact that there are still claims open from Hurricane Katrina nearly 20 years later. Think about that. Entire families may have lived 2 decades without getting the full aid they were promised. For those people, FEMA's promise to be there felt hollow. Noem argues that President Trump wants to fix that by empowering states to take the lead, arguing that the federal government has overpromised and underdelivered. To her, the real betrayal is when Washington makes promises it doesn't keep. But here's where it gets complicated, and this is what viewers need to understand. Shifting disaster response from the federal government to the states sounds good on paper, but in reality, it risks creating a 2-tier system of disaster aid. Wealthier states could raise the money and rebuild quickly. Poorer states, especially those hit by repeated disasters, might never fully recover. We've already seen examples of this after hurricanes, where local governments struggle to access federal money because they lacked the staff or expertise to navigate the process. If FEMA funding disappears and states are left on their own, some communities could be devastated for years, maybe permanently. This debate isn't really about FEMA as a single agency. It's about the role of the federal government in protecting its citizens. Should disaster response be a shared national responsibility, the same way we share a military to defend the country? Or should each state fend for itself, relying on whatever resources it can muster? This is a fundamental question about what kind of country we want to live in. And there's another dimension DeLauro hinted at: trust. When you tell Americans that the federal government will be there when disaster strikes, you'd better mean it. Because when that trust is broken, people lose faith not just in FEMA, but in the entire idea that government is there to serve them. That's when cynicism grows, when people feel abandoned, when they stop believing that the system works for them. Noem isn't wrong that FEMA has issues. Katrina exposed major flaws. Delays do happen, but the solution might not be to get rid of FEMA. It might be to fix it, make it faster, make it more accountable, and make sure that when it makes a promise, it delivers. Because the alternative, no national safety net at all, is a gamble that could leave millions of Americans stranded when they need help the most. This is why this exchange matters beyond politics. It's not about Democrats versus Republicans. It's about whether Americans can count on their government when they are most vulnerable. And as climate disasters become more frequent and more severe, this isn't some far-off policy debate. This is the reality we're all going to face sooner or later. So here's the question for you. Do you think FEMA is failing so badly that it should be dismantled and replaced with a state-led system? Or do you believe we need to double down and strengthen FEMA so it can respond faster and more fairly? Tell me what you think in the comments, because this isn't just a fight in Washington. This is about whether, when disaster strikes your community, there will be someone there to help you rebuild.